Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our entitled people, where people truly think they can do what they want, when they want, and no one else matters. And in today's episode, what is more self-entitled than thinking people's food and snacks belong to you? We've got workplace thieves, dine-and-dashing Karens, greedy roommates, all getting taught lessons they won't forget in this one. I hope you enjoy the lineup today, and seriously, don't shake your heads too hard at some of these posts. Let's dive in. So this happened a little while ago on my flight home, and I figured I would post this while it's still fresh in my mind. So my flight had just taken off, and they were coming around with food. Seated next to me is this woman, the Karen, and her kid. They told the flight attendant they didn't want to buy anything, and they just got water and the free snacks. The flight attendant double checks to make sure they don't want anything, and again, they refuse. I had a bit of an upset stomach at the time, and I knew I wasn't gonna eat anything right then. But I bought some Pringles and got their free cookies with my ginger ale to snack on later. It was a 4-hour flight. Well, less than 10 minutes later, the kid starts whining that he wants Pringles. The woman eyes my Pringles, but she doesn't say anything. Noticing her look at them, I asked if the kid wants my free cookies instead. The kid says no, so I quickly stash everything into my bag, thinking that she would be a decent human and not go through my stuff before going to use the washroom. I also want to add that the bag was tucked on the floor under the seat in front of me. I'm gone for 10 minutes at the most. I come back and my bag is open on my seat, food all pulled out, and the kid's there munching on my effing food. The cookies are done and the kid's stuffing his face with my Pringles, and he had a pack of my gummy candy open. That's when I say to the woman, "Excuse me, miss, why did you go into my bag and take my food?" She then responds, "Well, you weren't eating it and my child was hungry." At this point, I don't even hesitate before hitting the attendant button. I say, "Miss, that was my food that I paid for. It was tucked away inside my backpack. You can't just take it." The woman again argues and says, "Well, you weren't eating it." That's when the same flight attendant that sold me the Pringles comes over, and she asked what the problem was. I explain and say, I left to use the washroom, and I came back to find this lady had gone through my bag to take the food I purchased out, and she had given it to her kid to eat. That's when the woman argues and says, "No, I didn't. She offered it to me. She said I could have her snacks." The flight attendant says, "Ma'am, you refused my offer for any food twice, and you took her food?" Once again, the Karen pulls out the same argument, and she says, "Well, she wasn't eating it, and she offered me her snacks." At this point in time, I lean to the kid, and I say, "I offered you the free cookies that were given out, not all the snacks in my bag." The flight attendant then tells Karen, "Ma'am, you're gonna have to pay her back for her chips." The Karen says, "No way, she wasn't eating them." The flight attendant tells her, "Regardless if she's eating them or not, you stole what she purchased." Karen, of course, loses her mind at this, but the flight attendant stands her ground and tells Karen to buy me new chips. She also moves me to an empty row in the back, and she sets me up with another pack of free cookies and another drink. The flight attendant then lets me know that she'll be informing the flight crew of what happened, and that she was very sorry it happened. I don't know if she wound up getting in trouble once she left the plane, but I sure as hell hope I never run into her again. Once again, give someone an inch and they take a mile, right? But she offered me a pack of the free cookies you give out. That means everything in her bag is mine. Like the fact that Karen went through OP's bag that was tucked under the seat makes this so much worse, like the audacity of some folk. And this person comments, "My cousin is a flight attendant, and he deals with this crap every 6th flight." And guys, if you think that was a head shaker, listen to this next crafty Karen, who tries to get some free fast food. So here's some background. I was working as an assistant manager for a burger chain with local owners. Anyone who's worked with me knows that I will always take my job seriously on the clock, no matter what job that is. At this place, that means I fix customer complaints within reason. I also run the store during my shifts, and I fill in any spot in the store as needed. One thing I tried to do whenever possible was to support and believe my coworkers, as I had to work with them. But rarely did I have to work with customers, as most complaints could be handled by the cashier. So that said, this happened during a slow afternoon with light staffing. I was in the back going through a checklist for store maintenance when I start to hear a whole lot of cussing and insults. I quickly make my way up front and I ask what the issue is. The one cashier, Joe, starts to speak, but Karen interrupts him with a snap and she says, "The effing chicken in my sandwich is dry, and your useless employee says he can't give me a refund." She's pointing to a half-eaten chicken sandwich, and I also want to note that he can't give refunds, only managers could. And I also want to note that her tray is covered with sides, such as fries, onion rings, pies, all that stuff. The woman continues cussing and she says, "What the F are you gonna do to fix this?" Now at the time, we're unable to do partial refunds. It was either the whole order gets refunded or none of the order gets refunded. My immediate response was, "I will personally remake this sandwich for you, no extra charge. It'll be 7 minutes, as I'll put in fresh chicken just for you." I then tell my employee Joe to go take a break in the office. With that, Karen sat down, apparently satisfied, and I went back to the kitchen. The cook John had already dropped in a new batch of chicken as he heard the complaint. I prepped the sandwich, and the moment the chicken came out of the fryer, I tested the batch, which came out not dry. I then put one piece on the sandwich and then wrapped it and took it out to Karen with fries and a cookie on the house. 1 minute faster than I said I would be. I wish her a good day and then went back to the office to talk to Joe about what happened. Less than 15 minutes later, I can hear Karen screaming for attention at the front again. When I came back, Karen screams at me and says, "The effing chicken is dry. Give me a refund." That's when I notice Karen's tray is completely empty. The sandwich was eaten and all of her sides were gone, which boggled my mind. And to top it off, Karen had a smirk on her face, like she'd won and she was doing a victory lap. That's when I paused, breathed in, and I said, "No." Hearing that, Karen was shocked. She immediately began to scream and cuss at me, calling me a stupid worker, calling the store a waste of space, and finally repeating that the chicken was dry, after a solid minute of pure nonsense coming out of her mouth. That's when I say, "Ma'am, I personally went to the kitchen to make this sandwich. I pulled your chicken out of the fryer the moment it was done. I tested the batch to make sure it was perfect, and I brought it straight to your table. I can assure you the chicken wasn't dry. You've eaten over $50 worth of food. I will not authorize a refund." Cue the next 5 minutes. The next 5 minutes were filled with her screaming insults, complaining about the food that was suddenly poorly made, and demanding a refund and almost smacking one of my workers. I simply kept saying no throughout Karen's temper tantrum. By this point, both Joe and John were nearby watching, as was every other customer. Karen then gets really quiet for a moment, and then she decides to play the race card. She says, "You're only treating me like this 'cause I'm black." And that got me really pissed. I was just doing my job, and this woman was pulling this stunt. The store became silent for a moment before I replied as evenly as I could, "Ma'am, I've treated you with the same respect I show to everyone, and I treated you with more patience than I show even my own parents. But if you really insist, I can start being racist." The woman just stared at me for about 15 seconds. She then grabs her purse and leaves. I never saw or heard from her again, but a week later, we find out that Karen left a corporate complaint. I won't get into any details, but she said we yelled racial slurs at her, and basically said what she needed to say to try and get me fired. Thankfully, we do have cameras in the store, and that saved me. The GM started laughing when he pulled up the video from security. The woman was banned from coming back. I did end up leaving a couple of months later, but every time I swing by, John always asks if I can start being racist. Seriously, thank goodness for cameras, and shame on that Karen for trying such a dirty stunt, and when that didn't work, tried to ruin OP's employment. Like I said this a few episodes back, guys, like if the food is so horrible, why do people eat the whole meal and then complain and demand a refund? It makes no sense. And this person comments and adds, "This restaurant post reminded me of this story, and you know the scam. Whine about perfectly good food to get some sort of compensation. In their old age, my parents befriended another older couple who would pull this stunt everywhere they went. After my mom told me a few stories how their new friends had shown them how to get discounted or free meals, I felt like I was suddenly the responsible adult. I was concerned about the bad influence that these people were on my parents. While visiting my parents with my girlfriend, this older couple attended dinner with us. As expected, the food was brought to the table and immediately they began to dramatically complain to one another about the quality, taste, temperature, all that stuff. They were making a scene to attract the attention of the waitress. When our waitress returned to ask how we're doing, this miserable old bastard who played the lead role in their act took a deep breath, struck a dramatic pose with his hand raised to begin complaining. That's when I leaned forward and I cut him off before he could finish the first word. And I say, "Everything is absolutely fantastic. It's all great. Thank you very much." The waitress smiled and she began her obligatory, "Great, well if you need any," and that's when the man made a second attempt. He starts and says, "We come here all the time and I expect..." Now, I didn't acknowledge that he was speaking at all. I just repeated that all was just as we ordered and thank you very much again. The man was stunned and he was thrown off from his routine by my interruption. During this pause, the waitress walked away, as it seemed clear that she knew what they were trying to accomplish. The man turns bright red and he told me that when he's speaking to wait my turn. I just turned to my girlfriend smiling, and without lowering my voice, I state how pitiful it is that some people could be dishonest, deceitful, and put at risk the livelihood of a cook, server, or hostess for a pathetic discount. My passive-aggressive reverse parenting broke my parents of the habit in short time. They soon realized that this couple they were friends with would always complain everywhere they went, and they end up cutting contact with them. So this happened about 10 years ago when I was still in high school. I used to work at a restaurant as a busboy. One particular night, this man came in all by himself and he orders a pizza and an appetizer and a few beers. There was nothing weird about him, but it was a slow night, and I distinctly remember him because I'm fairly certain he had come to dine before. The guy ate his food and left. I cleaned the table after he left, and as soon as I was finished, the waitress who had his table asked me if I accidentally threw his bill and money away. Now at this point, I had been working at the restaurant for 2 years, and I always check to make sure there isn't money or a credit card receipt on the table before I throw anything away. Turns out, the guy left without paying, and yes, it does suck, and yes, the waitress got stiffed on a mediocre tip, but it does suck knowing that we probably would never catch the guy because who's dumb enough to come back to a restaurant in which you previously dined and dashed? Well, you're in for a surprise. Fast forward 3 weeks and it's another slow night. I notice a familiar face walk in the door. The guy's by himself and one of the waitresses sits him down at a booth. Now, I know for sure that this is the same guy that was in the restaurant 3 weeks ago that left without paying. I asked the waitress what he ordered and it was an appetizer and a pizza. I told the owner that this guy was the same guy that stiffed the restaurant 3 weeks ago. The owner pulls up that old receipt and it was identical to what the guy just ordered. And here's where it gets good. One of the pizza cooks was a pretty scary looking guy. He had lots of tattoos up and down his arms and he had a general mean look on his face all the time. But in actuality, he was a very nice guy. So the owner tells him to go stand by the door just in case the guy tried to leave without paying. The pizza cook also made a point to not break eye contact with the customer. Right about now, everyone working knew what was going on, so occasionally, other workers would come to the dining room floor and take a peek at the guy. The guy started noticing that the employees were looking at him, and he became obviously uncomfortable. The manager went to his table and then explained that his food was ready, but he would have to pay his bill before he received his food. She didn't mention his other unpaid bill yet. He then requests that his order be to go. The manager went back and packed up his food. Meanwhile, the guy gets up to use the bathroom. Once he walks toward the bathroom, the pizza cook watching the door left his post to go talk to the manager about what's going on. The guy saw his opportunity and he books it out of the restaurant. The manager and I both saw him leave, so she runs out after the guy. She caught up to him pretty quick and she asked why he left and that he didn't pay for his food that was being made. The guy tried to play dumb and he said, "Really? I thought I left the money on the table." The manager told him, "No, you didn't pay and you also didn't grab your food. And you also didn't pay for your meal the last time you were here." He then said, "Well, I only live a few blocks away. If you let me go, I'll just run home to get the money to pay for my food. In fact, that's what I was going to do." By this point, the pizza cook joins in. The manager brought the guy back in and sat him down at the bar and proceeded to call the police. The cops show up a few minutes later and ask the guy why he didn't pay this time or last time. The guy exercised his right to remain silent and he was put in handcuffs and he was walked out of the restaurant into a police car. The guy never came back after that. You know what? For being this dumb to return to a place you stole from and trying the same stunt again, like the guy deserves jail time. And I'll bet he did this at all the nearby restaurants. But yeah, what a lame excuse, right? Oh, I was just running home to go get money to pay for my food. Yeah, because you always go home to get your money and come back to pay the tab when it's convenient, right? Lamest excuse ever. So this happened recently. I was doing a semester-long college program at the happiest place on earth, living in an apartment owned by that company with 5 other roommates. This one girl, who I'll call Vivian, the Karen of this post, was extremely nice to me. She always complimented my looks, gave me rousing speeches, how I'm gonna do amazing things in life, and she would always tell me that I'm amazing and wonderful and great. I thought of her as a friend, and since I noticed that she ate nothing but instant ramen, Go-Gurts, and Rice Krispies, I start offering some of my food to eat. Well, that was a big mistake. She took that as she had free reign on all my food. She proceeded to eat more than half the groceries I bought, but only my junk food items like Hot Pockets, Pop-Tarts, potato chips, soda, the good stuff in her words. I would notice that my food went missing, only to find out that she's eaten my food. I had asked her to ask me first before eating anything, and she wouldn't even bother. I started to realize after that she's one of those people who claim to be poor but wasn't really. She would give away half her shifts and thus making no money, and then she would buy tickets to go to SeaWorld and other expensive places. She would also go out all the time, and she never invited me anywhere, nor did she ever talk to me unless I talked to her first. I realized I was being used for my food, so I stopped letting her eat my food, and this is where her personality changed. Every day, she would either pretend I didn't exist or randomly tell me that I was an a-hole, a bitch, that I should stop talking because everything I said was stupid. It was like a switch was flipped. She was no longer a nice person at all. She acted like it was my fault that she had to go back to eating instant noodles and canned beans. She also started to alienate the entire apartment through her negativity, and she was always saying rude things to me. Before our program ended, we had 2 roommates quit and go home early, and one roommate switched apartments, leaving me, Vivian, and one other roommate left to clean a 6-person apartment before move-out date. As expected, Vivian didn't help us clean anything, since she hasn't cleaned anything all program long. One night, while I was still awake at 3 in the morning, I overhear Vivian talk on the phone how she was gonna secretly move out of the apartment while the other roommate and I were sleeping because she wanted to force us to clean the entire apartment by ourselves. She also claimed that we were harassing her, singling me out as the person who targeted her. She told the person on the phone that I was taking all of her food all semester long, causing her to go hungry. Well, a few days later, I wake up to find that Vivian really did move out while we were asleep. However, she left an entire box of unopened ramen, Go-Gurt, and popsicles behind. She also left some items scattered about in her room. I went to the person at housing and I told her of my predicament. She looked up Vivian for me in the system, and it turns out that even though there's pretty much nothing in her room now, she never actually turned her key in. I know she's staying in a hotel, but she's still going in for work, so I'm assuming that she eventually plans on coming back for her food on move-out date. Well, come move-out day, I decided it was time for me to clean out the fridge. My roommate didn't want anything, so I grabbed a trash bag and I threw every single little thing that belonged to Vivian in there. I took Vivian's ramen, popsicles, and Go-Gurts and put them in my bag. I bid my roommate farewell and loaded up my car. Well, not even 3 hours later, I get spam texts from Vivian asking me if I took all of her food. I didn't even bother to respond. If she's accusing me of stealing her food, causing her to starve all semester, well, I'm going to take all of her food. They made for excellent snacks on my 8-hour drive home. I absolutely love how OP got back at Vivian in the end. If you're accusing me of stealing, then that's what I'm going to do. But what a nightmare roommate, right? Like, she literally offered nothing but drama and headache while just taking from people and refusing to clean up after herself. Like, get your act together, Vivian. And these next two, well, they share some wild ways that they got back at their food thieves. Listen to these stories. A few years back, shortly after high school, I acquired my first apartment, living with 2 roommates. Both of them I'd considered close enough friends to occupy a space with. Little did I know that living with people is incredibly complex, due to the lack of F's given during your early 20s. That said, my roommate Brett had some sort of sick fascination with eating all of my food. It didn't matter what it was or who it belonged to, he would demolish it, namely my Reese's Puffs. Now, I had tried multiple methods of reasoning with him, marking my name on items, hiding them, even heated confrontation. But the guy persisted, and it was time to extract vengeance. Here's a little bit of background on my situation in order to provide clarity to the story. At the time, I was working at this animal ranch owned by a non-profit organization that rescued abandoned animals. There was a plethora of random animals, ranging from peacocks to pigs that took residency within the sanctuary, all of them less than desirable to work with and clean up after, but none of them could exceed the absolute nightmare disguised as a pack of llamas. These were mean little bastards who would find any way to torment you, be it spitting, crapping, chasing, staring, or shouting. They had it out for me from the get-go. And here's a fun fact that most of you will not know, is that llamas all like to congregate and crap in one giant pile. This is like some form of sacred place for them, and they do not like it being disturbed. I was responsible for hauling shovel after shovel of these little nuggets into large containers, and then hauling them off the property. And here's where things get interesting. One day, after my food had been stolen yet again, I had this sort of epiphany as I dug the shovel into this almighty giant pile of llama crap. It had an interesting pellet shape, and it was relatively light and airy. It also had different shades of brown, ranging from a creamy peanut butter color to an earthly dark chocolate tone, and it looked a lot like Reese's Puffs. There was no time to waste and no hesitation. The son of a gun had just devoured the rest of my cereal, and it was time to give him a lesson in apartment living. I bought a brand new box of cereal on the way home, and I replaced about a third of the box with llama crap that I collected in a freezer bag. I made sure to mix up the droppings thoroughly with the cereal, and just like that, the trap was set. It was a Saturday when he rolls out of bed at the usual time, around 10 o'clock, and enjoyed a quick wake and bake and some beers. He was well drunk and high before making his way to the kitchen and gorged himself on whatever delicious treats he could get his hands on. I waited anxiously in my bedroom, awaiting the sound of the plastic cereal bag unraveling. He was going for it. I then hear the fridge open for some milk and a drawer open for a spoon. I then hear him step over to the couch and sit down. There was complete silence before the almighty crunch crunch of victory echoed through the apartment, and then he turned the TV on. There was another crunch crunch. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, what the heck? Are you that far gone that you can't realize you're eating llama turd? He didn't. I told him on the 30th day of our eviction. This happened well over 2 decades ago. I was part of an organization that would travel to countries and do missionary work. At the time, we were in China, and our team was about 12 people, half male, half female. There were 2 apartments, one for men and one for women. We were each responsible for our own groceries and cooking, and each received weekly allowances for food, travel, etc. The first few weeks went fine, but we all began to notice some of our food would go missing. We had a team meeting about this and asked whoever it was to stop. We all had our suspicions of who it was, but we didn't want to point fingers. The person we suspected was Swiper, obviously not his real name. The guy was somewhat of an odd duck, but he had a weird sense of humor that made most of us laugh. He was also somewhat of a germaphobe, always using hand sanitizer, always cleaning, yada yada yada. A week goes by and the food still continues to go missing. Our team leader has a private meeting with Swiper to question him about the missing food and drinks. Swiper outright denies it, saying it's not him. Unfortunately, there really isn't much we can do at this point. Nobody has actually seen him steal, as he would usually do it when everyone was out. This went on for some time, and despite questioning Swiper and doing everything possible to get him to stop, nothing changed. That said, one of the other team members was full-on stereotypical Texan. Let's call him Peter. Now, Peter's fed up with this, and he wasn't too fond of Swiper anyways. He decides to go really extreme. He says to us that he's gonna pee in his own orange juice, and anyone who steals it will get what they deserve. His exact words were, "If you ain't stealing my food, you ain't got nothing to worry about." A few days pass, and Peter notices that his orange juice is slowly disappearing. That night, when everyone's in the apartment, Peter says, "Y'all do know that I've been peeing in my orange juice, right?" He says this as he takes a swig of his own orange juice cocktail. Swiper then jumps off the couch and he starts having a full-blown screaming match and panic attack. Peter basically says, "Well, don't steal people's food." Swiper eventually gets sent home for stealing from the market, jumping the transit turnstiles, and a few other things. Peter did end up telling us that he didn't really pee in his own juice. He just made us believe it, so we'd all react the way we did when he called out Swiper, and his plan worked so well. Swiper really did believe that he drank Peter's nasty orange juice concoction, and to this day, it still makes me smile. You know what? Sometimes when it comes to food thieves, you gotta get extreme, I guess. And I love how Peter made everyone, especially Swiper, believe that he was drinking more than orange juice. But like Peter says, if you ain't stealing my food, you ain't got nothing to worry about. Like, it's just wild how some full-grown people still don't give a crap, and they do it anyways. But that's r/EntitledPeople for you. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy, crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/malicious compliance episode, where psycho Karen bosses are getting taught lessons they won't forget. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.